it's Kayla, K-Money baby. I'm sorry if you can hear the shower in the background. My boyfriend is taking a shower in the hotel, so hopefully it serves as a little bit of ASMR for you guys. So this is actually not a pre-planned video. This is something that was just kind of spur of the moment. I got really inspired to write a mini, Instagram post that I would typically post as an extended Patreon article on Instagram last night, and I was like, why don't I make this a short little bite-sized video? So it's going to be a little bit intense. There's going to be some sensitive topics. I guess I should say a trigger warning. I don't think this is anything that anyone's necessarily going to have, a personal anecdote relating to the things that I'm going to talk about, but they're certainly a little gruesome, a little gory. So just a heads up, this is also not a reflection of like my own personal beliefs on astrology and the world and spirituality and God and the way that everything works. So the contents of this video would be best used as just a tool for analysis as usual. So what initially inspired me to even get kind of into this mini deep dive was the fact that Doja Cat was sporting this very Saturn-esque golden handbag at the Billboard Awards. Congrats to her. That woman has clearly been working relentlessly the last 2, 3, 4 years. Well, she's been around for a while. I remember I used to listen to her sophomore year of high school, which was like 2012, 13. Shout out to the OG Doja fans. But it's clear that she's been climbing to the top of the charts time and time and time again the last few years, right? I feel like peak coronavirus was her really showing what she's capable of, and she doesn't miss. And thankfully that's reflective in the rewards that she's winning. She's really, seeing the fruits of her labor. But what interests me is that Saturn itself is a challenging planet. I talk about this a lot in my natal chart readings, the readings that I offer people on my website. It's a struggle planet. It literally rules poverty. It's very karmic, it's very authoritative, it's arguably incredibly suffocating, and it's overall just a planet that often requires a lot of sacrifice in return for a lot of success. The example that I always use in the natal chart readings is that Saturn is kind of like this tough love father. It's like this dad that, tells you he loves you, but it feels very cold and disconnected. And I try to paint this image of like a dad that's trying to teach their baby how to swim, but instead of, taking the baby steps, being gentle, nurturing the child into, introducing it to a situation that it's never interacted with before, you would want to imagine this father throwing a baby in, this public pool and everybody watching and being like, oh my God, like what is wrong with this man? What is going on? And the baby's choking and screaming and crying. And then after a little bit of time passes, this baby's starting to learn how to swim. It calms down a little bit and he's fine. And the conclusion of that is everybody being like, oh my God, that was the most horrific thing I've ever seen. But through that struggle, the child now knows how to swim, probably in a very petrifying way that it wouldn't have been able to learn otherwise. So I use that example because wherever we have Saturn in our natal charts is typically where we are that baby. We are thrown into the pool and forced to learn how to swim. And in real life application, that typically looks like very trying times, whether that's having to grow up very quickly due to our circumstances, our environment, our family. Because it's the Time Lord, it often rules like generational things, so generational trauma, generational curses, whether that's cycles of abuse, financial struggles, some sort of pain or illness. And people with Capricorn placements in general typically have this deep sense of wisdom in them through pain. So people that are Saturn ruled, meaning someone that maybe has Saturn in the first house, somebody that is a Capricorn rising or maybe more traditionally an Aquarius rising, they have this energy kind of built into them, and they're a little bit more statue-esque on the emotional front when it comes to having to shoulder a lot of responsibility, stress, or just carrying the weight of unfair circumstances on their back, probably from a very young age. So it's interesting to me that Doja Cat was kind of sporting this, Saturn accessory because it's the most challenging planet, literally again ruling poverty, authority, power, and the devil himself. So at the Billboard Awards, she won 4 awards, including top album, top artist, I believe top female artist as well. These are big rewards worth celebrating. However, it's probably at the expense of her mental health, her physical health, and her ability to actually be human. We've seen her kind of talk about her weight of work in her live streams.
And you want to know what the thing is? In between making all of these songs for this album, I'm doing all this other shit. I'm doing all this shit that I don't fucking want to do. I don't want to take fucking pictures. Do I want to do that shit because I have to? No. And all those days that were taken from me that I could have been making shit or doing something productive, that's not productive to me. Answering questions isn't productive. I'm sorry. Fuck out of here.
I saw something about her taking back the comments of wanting to quit music or something like that. And this process itself of seeing pretty much any celebrity skyrocket to fame seemingly overnight, even if it was a long time coming, we kind of see these people get picked up and swooped up by the industry and milked for all of their talent and creativity and influence until they kind of become this lifeless person that, yes, has all the success and money and fame that we all yearn for, but at what expense? You know, it requires a lot of sacrifice, and it kind of makes you think, is it even worth it? So if we take a deep dive into Greek mythology and biblical context, Saturn, which was also referred to, I believe it's pronounced Moloch, I don't want to pronounce this incorrectly, but for lack of a better pronunciation, it was a god in ancient Roman religion. So it was a very highly respected pagan deity, pretty much symbolic of very insane wealth and power, time, abundance, but all of this in return for child sacrifice. Saturn literally used to eat his children. So the idea of this is like generational infinite youth and disposable power and wealth. So the idea that we're looking at here is generational infinite youth, you know, disposable power and wealth, which more modernly kind of coincides with the theories that, you know, the elite manage and indulge in these pedophilic sex rings and the torturing of babies in return for energy, power, youth. I can't quite define this in my own terms, like I said, because this isn't necessarily a reflection of what I believe to be the truth. However, we can't ignore the parallels between, you know, mythology and how that bleeds into the theories that we now see on Reddit and in deep dives and on the internet every single day. There seems to be this underlying common denominator around sacrifice. So some astrological theories kind of hypothesize that celebrities don't necessarily quote unquote make a deal with the devil, but rather worship Saturn as a planetary god, as it's often referred to as the Time Lord because, you know, it rewards surviving struggle. Some say this is why we see celebrities skyrocket immediately after losing somebody very close to them. For example, Megan Thee Stallion and the loss of her mother, or even Ariana Grande. She really has this like NASA space kind of aesthetic going on. She literally wrote a song titled Seven Rings, which is just a double entendre because it's about, you know, her giving literal rings to her girlies, as well as Saturn itself literally having 7 rings. And this song was all about her, you know, massive wealth and fame. And we kind of saw her pop off with Thank You Next and 7 Rings immediately after the loss of Mac Miller. Obviously, Ariana Grande was very famous already at this time, but that's when she really started to take the world by storm in her own lane.
I find it interesting that this has been one of like the best years of my career and like the worst of my life. I'm not saying that for sympathy, I'm just saying that because I feel like a lot of people would look at someone in my position right now, I guess, like Woman of the Year, an artist that could be at her peak, like reaching her, you know, whatever, and think she's really got her shit together, you know, like she's really on it, like she's got it all. And I do, but as far as like my personal life goes, I really have no idea what the fuck I'm doing.
I talk a lot about this stuff more on Patreon. The link is going to be in the description. I just know that YouTube and Instagram don't really like this type of content, so if you're looking for something a little bit deeper than this, it's going to be all over there. If you want to subscribe, I have 3 different tiers. 2 of them are incredibly affordable, and one of them is a little bit more personalized, but for this kind of content, I would suggest the 1111 tier. Anyways, of course, this is all conspiracy, but it almost feels impossible to ignore that, you know, the planet of sacrifice, as well as Pluto, the planet of death and destruction, are very commonly appointed to in the entertainment industry time and time again. Both are arguably the most tumultuous planets of sacrifice and abuse, of power and control, and most people have their Saturn return in their late 20s to 30 years of age, in which we can accredit the 27 Club to, which is a pop culture phenomenon that really highlights countless celebrities who've died at the age of 27 or around there, with many of the deaths being linked to very high-risk lifestyles at the expense of their major, you know, fame and fortune. Athletes, rappers, musicians, you name it. And when people go through their Saturn return, which to be clear, this doesn't only happen to celebrities, it happens to everybody, it's kind of when life comes at you fast, and it's almost like a second puberty where there's a fork in the road where it's like, okay, this is where you are in life based off of the decisions that you've been making. Do you want to continue living life this way, or do you want to take an alternative route? And it's usually this time of our life where we either start to see the punishment, the consequence, or the reward of the way that we've been living our life, with Saturn again being this very karmic, tough love kind of ideology. So this is when some people overdose, or they have to get checked into rehab, or they suddenly realize that they've been drinking all these years and they lost all of their friends, or they've been mistreating people in their relationships and they're alone and they're seeing all their friends get married, or they're completely broke because they didn't take a path that was good to them. And then we see other people who've maybe had a tough life pretty much their entire life, or we've just seen them struggle a lot growing up, hit that first million, or they meet the love of their life, or they have their first child. And it's not to say that people that are struggling in this time deserve it, or people that are rewarded are good people, but that's the thing about Saturn. It's the tests and trials and tribulations of decision, sacrifice, and reward. So for example, with Doja Cat, she's 26 right now, but this is kind of the culmination of all of these, the last 10 years of the last decade of all of her hard work, culminating to this big successful moment where she's booked and busy 24/7, but she's on that Saturn treadmill of never-ending work. It's also said that by wearing accessories, getting tattoos, or even decorating yourself in planetary themes kind of activates that planet and its influence that's in your natal chart. Meaning if you have a very afflicted Saturn with challenging aspects, and then you get a tattoo of it, you're now kind of inviting and emphasizing the restriction, challenge, and struggle of its archetypes. Whereas, if Saturn is very supportive of your natal chart, then you'll be more inclined to flourish in the riches and the luxury and the power that it exudes, especially when, the native is a beneficiary of nepotism. So Doja Cat has her natal Saturn at 18 degrees, which is often referred to as a diabolical degree. I don't always think it's that serious, but it is something to take note of, and it's in her 5th house of fame, talent, sex, and creativity in Pisces, which is ruled by Neptune, and it's forming a sextile to Neptune in her 3rd house of communication and self-expression at 22 degrees, which is also another critical degree that's often referred to as the kill or be killed degree. She also has Saturn in an opposition to her Virgo moon in the 11th house. So she'll pretty much always remain successful due to her talent, her beauty, her sex appeal, but she may suffer from very intense feelings of perfectionism, depression, I would even argue a lot of loneliness behind closed doors, almost like putting your heart in a jail cell. That's the kind of feeling I think of when we see a Saturn in a moon opposition, as well as also being on this very relentless search for like a sense of belonging in the world around her, because having your moon in the 11th house is typically someone who redefines what home and family means in their friendships or in the world around them, or in a group or a community that feels like home in a way that wasn't available to them growing up in their actual childhood. Virgo moons also tend to kind of confuse their self-worth with how productive or successful they are, because it's an earth sign, it's very grounded, it's practical, it's logical, and it's ruled by Mercury, which is the planet of drawing conclusions, looking at things objectively. So it's like taking your emotions but now looking at them from a very black and white perspective, and adding that in an opposition to a very challenging, restricting planet looks like a lot of discipline and a lack of nurturance for her feelings, which may have started kind of like from limited beliefs in the way that she was raised. But this is someone who will time and time again shoot to be more and more successful, thinking it's kind of going to give them that satisfaction or that feeling of self-acceptance, when the real lesson is that she needs to be okay without all those things. She has strong spiritual protection, but needs to avoid, I would say, conflict around escapism, addiction, mental illness, even hidden information. If she does have children, I would say it probably wouldn't be until after her Saturn return, but she most likely struggles with her feminine side, because I feel like it's more so used as almost like a performative tool rather than her actually being able to fully and vulnerably lean into like this flow state that we know feminine energy to be, meaning that her feminine side is more of a fantasy that's monetized rather than her actually being in this artistic flow, because we know that while we see these beautiful performances from her, it's the result and the product of, being a machine behind closed doors. She's most likely an overworked creative, really struggling with the industry machine expectations, and Saturn for her specifically looks like unbelievable success at the expense of self. We'll definitely get a better look at how this is kind of going to boil over and culminate into this bigger moment that's probably going to last about a year long when she does have her Saturn return. And I do want to note that her natal Saturn is in her 5th house in the Placidus system, but in the whole house system it does fall in her 6th house of work, health, servitude, what she does for other people, her job overall.
Miss 11 nominations, 8 of them tonight.
Oh my God.
So I'm curious to see how this is going to affect her. I know this became a little bit of a more introspective look at her Saturn in her chart. However, again, this did kind of start from a curiosity that I had around Saturn worship and celebrities. And I think I'm going to be looking more into how Saturn in the chart of major icons, entertainers, performers, and the major transits that come with that affect or correlate their level of success or fame. And if there's some sort of exchange or offering that, you know, the top 1%, 10% maybe takes advantage of in occultism in order to get this major desired end result. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Everything you'll need will be in the description, Patreon, Instagram, booking, etc. And I'll see you guys in the next one.